The day of the spring recital arrived with perfect weather. Sunshine streamed through the windows of Riverside High School, and there was an electric feeling of anticipation in the air. Students who were performing walked through the hallways with a mixture of excitement and nervous energy. Parents started arriving hours before the evening performance, wanting to get good seats. Keisha spent most of the day trying to stay calm. Her cast had been removed 2 days earlier, and her right arm felt strange without it. The skin was pale and slightly itchy, and the arm felt lighter than she remembered. The doctor had given her exercises to do, but had warned her not to put too much strain on it right away. At home, Nana Rose helped Keisha get ready for the performance. She had bought her granddaughter a beautiful dress, deep purple with elegant sleeves, perfect for a piano recital. As Keisha looked at herself in the mirror, she barely recognized the confident young woman staring back at her. "You look beautiful, baby," Nana Rose said, adjusting the collar of the dress. "But more importantly, you look strong. That's what really matters." Keisha's mother came in, already tearing up even though the performance hadn't started yet. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered, hugging Keisha carefully. "No matter what happens tonight, you've already won." When they arrived at the school that evening, the parking lot was packed. Inside the auditorium, every seat was filled and people were standing in the back. Keisha peeked out from backstage and felt her heart skip a beat at the size of the crowd. This was bigger than any performance she had ever done. Backstage, the other performers were warming up and doing last-minute preparations. Destiny had gotten special permission to be backstage as Keisha's support person, and she stayed close, offering encouragement and helping Keisha stay focused. Principal Hayes gathered all the performers together. "I want you all to know how proud I am of each and every one of you," she said warmly. "Tonight is your night to shine. Remember to breathe, trust your preparation, and most importantly, enjoy this moment. You've all worked so hard to be here." The recital began at 7 o'clock sharp. Mr. Williams served as the MC, introducing each performer with genuine enthusiasm. The first student, the flute player Keisha had seen at auditions, performed beautifully. The audience applauded warmly. One by one, students took the stage, each showcasing their talents. Keisha was scheduled to perform eighth, right after intermission. As the first half of the recital proceeded, she found a quiet corner backstage and closed her eyes, running through the piece in her mind. She visualized every note, every movement of her hand, every emotional beat of the music. Intermission came, and the audience filed out into the lobby for refreshments. Backstage, Keisha took deep breaths, feeling the butterflies in her stomach. Destiny held her hand, not saying anything, just being present. 5 minutes to intermission end, a student stage manager called out. This was it. Keisha stood up and shook out her left hand, keeping it loose and ready. She could hear the audience returning to their seats, the sound of hundreds of conversations creating a low hum in the auditorium. The lights dimmed, and the second half of the recital began. The seventh performer, a violinist, finished her piece to thunderous applause. Mr. Williams took the microphone again. "Our next performer is a young lady who has shown extraordinary dedication and courage. Despite facing a significant challenge, she never gave up on her passion for music. Please welcome Keisha Williams, who will be performing Scriabin's Prelude and Nocturne for the left hand." The audience applauded as Keisha walked onto the stage. The lights were bright, and for a moment she couldn't see individual faces in the crowd, just a sea of people. She walked to the piano with her head held high, aware that everyone could see her recently healed right arm. She sat down at the bench and adjusted her position. Her left hand found its place on the keys while her right hand rested gently in her lap. She looked out at the audience one more time, and this time she could make out faces. There was Nana Rose in the third row, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. Her mother sat next to her, hands clasped together. Destiny's whole family was there. Miss Chen was in the front row, offering an encouraging smile, and there in the middle section was Mr. Richardson. He sat alone, his expression serious but not unkind. Their eyes met for just a second, and he gave the smallest nod. It wasn't forgiveness exactly, but it was acknowledgement. It was enough. Keisha turned her attention to the piano. The auditorium fell completely silent. Somewhere in the back, she heard a baby coo softly, then quiet. The moment stretched out, suspended in time. She took one deep breath, let it out slowly, and placed her fingers on the keys. The opening notes emerged into the silence, and immediately the audience was transported. Keisha's left hand moved with confidence and grace. creating melodies that seemed impossible for one hand to produce. The prelude section was delicate and introspective, each note carefully placed, creating a tapestry of sound. As she played, Keisha felt herself entering that special state where the music took over. Her hand knew what to do. All those hours of practice had prepared her for this exact moment. She didn't have to think about where to place her fingers or how much pressure to apply. It all flowed naturally like water following its course. The piece built in intensity, moving into more complex passages. Keisha's fingers flew over the keys, playing rapid runs that showcased both technical skill and emotional depth. Her left hand had to do the work of two hands, carrying both the singing melody and the supporting harmonies, and it did so flawlessly. In the audience, people sat transfixed. Some had come expecting to see a feel-good story of a girl overcoming adversity. What they were getting instead was a masterclass in musical artistry. This wasn't about sympathy or admiration for her perseverance, though those elements were present. This was about pure talent and skill creating something genuinely beautiful. Parents who had been recording on their phones slowly lowered them, realizing they needed to simply experience this moment rather than capture it. Students who had been shifting in their seats grew still. Even the young children in the audience seemed mesmerized by the music flowing from the stage. Keisha moved into the nocturne section, the most emotionally intense part of the piece. This was where she could truly express everything she had been feeling over the past 2 months. The frustration, the determination, the moments of doubt, and the ultimate triumph. Every emotion poured through her fingers into the keys, and the piano sang it all back to the audience. Tears streamed down faces throughout the auditorium, but no one made a sound. Mr. Richardson sat with his hands gripped together, his jaw tight, his eyes fixed on the stage. Whatever wall he had built around his heart was cracking, and something genuine was breaking through. Nana Rose wept openly, but they were tears of joy and pride. She had known from the beginning that her granddaughter was special, but even she hadn't fully grasped the depth of Keisha's gift until this moment. Miss Chen watched with the pride of a teacher seeing her student soar beyond what even she had thought possible. This performance was beyond technical perfection. This was artistry in its purest form. The piece built to its emotional climax, Keisha's hand producing sounds that seemed to shake the very air of the auditorium. Then gradually it began to descend, growing softer and more intimate. The final section was like a whispered secret, delicate notes that seemed to float in the air before dissolving into silence. Keisha played the last few measures with infinite tenderness. The final note rang out, a single pure tone that seemed to hang in the air forever before fading away. She kept her hand on the keys for a moment, letting the silence settle. Then slowly she lifted her hand and placed it in her lap. The silence continued for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only a few seconds. Then someone in the audience stood up. Then another. And another. Within moments, the entire auditorium was on its feet, applauding with an intensity that shook the building. The ovation went on and on. People weren't just clapping politely. They were cheering, whooping, some openly sobbing as they applauded. It was the kind of response usually reserved for professional concerts, not high school recitals. Keisha stood up from the piano bench, completely overwhelmed. She had hoped the performance would go well, but this was beyond anything she could have imagined. She took a bow, tears streaming down her face, and the applause somehow grew even louder. She looked out at the audience and saw her family crying and cheering. She saw students she didn't even know well standing and clapping with genuine enthusiasm. She saw Principal Hayes and Mr. Williams standing with huge smiles on their faces. And she saw Mr. Richardson, standing like everyone else, applauding steadily, his expression transformed into something that looked like wonder. Finally, after what felt like several minutes, the applause began to die down. Keisha gave one more bow and walked off the stage, her legs shaking so badly she could barely stand. The moment she got backstage, Destiny threw her arms around her, both of them crying and laughing at the same time. "That was incredible," Destiny sobbed. "You were absolutely incredible." The rest of the recital continued, but everyone knew what the highlight had been. The other performers were wonderful, but Keisha's performance had been transcendent. When the recital ended and the performers took a final group bow, the audience gave everyone a standing ovation, but many eyes kept drifting to Keisha, still processing what they had witnessed. After the recital, the lobby was packed with people. Keisha was immediately surrounded by well-wishers. Parents she didn't know came up to tell her how moved they were. Students offered congratulations. Local newspaper reporters asked for interviews. Through the crowd, Mr. Richardson made his way toward her. When he reached her, he extended his hand. Keisha shook it, and he held on for a moment, looking directly into her eyes. "I was wrong about you," he said simply. "Completely wrong. What you did tonight, that was the work of a true musician, not just a talented student, but a real artist. Thank you for reminding this old man what music is really about." Keisha felt a weight lift from her shoulders. "Thank you, Mr. Richardson, that means a lot." He nodded once more, then disappeared into the crowd. Keisha never saw him again after that night. She heard later that he stopped substituting at the school, retiring for good. She liked to think that maybe witnessing her performance had given him some peace, had reminded him of why he fell in love with music in the first place. Miss Chen fought her way through the crowd and hugged Keisha tightly. "I've taught for 15 years, she said through tears. "That's the best performance I've ever witnessed from any of my students. You've grown so much, not just as a musician, but as a person. I'm honored to be your teacher." As the crowd began to thin, Keisha finally made it to where her family was waiting. Nana Rose pulled her into a long hug, not saying anything, just holding her granddaughter close. When she finally pulled back, she had the biggest smile on her face. "I knew it," Nana Rose said. "I knew you had it in you. But baby, what you did tonight, that was something special. That was a gift to everyone in that room." Keisha's mother kissed her forehead. "I've never been more proud. Not because you played perfectly, but because you never gave up. You showed everyone what's possible when you believe in yourself." On the drive home, Keisha sat in the back seat, exhausted, but happy. She looked down at her left hand, the hand that had carried her through one of the most challenging experiences of her life, the hand that had proven it could do impossible things. Her right arm was still weak, still healing. It would be a few more weeks before she could play with both hands again. But that was okay. She had learned something valuable through this whole experience. Limitations were often just opportunities in disguise. Challenges could be transformed into triumphs, and the only person who could truly define her potential was herself. When they got home, Keisha went straight to the old upright piano in the living room. She sat down on the bench, looking at the keys in the soft lamplight. Gently, she raised both hands and placed them on the keys, feeling the familiar smooth coolness under her fingers. Her right hand was weak, and it couldn't play complex passages yet, but together with her left hand she played a simple melody, one of the first songs Nana Rose had taught her years ago. It was basic, nothing like the complex piece she had performed tonight, but there was something perfect about it, something that felt like coming home. Nana Rose came and stood in the doorway, listening. She didn't say anything, just smiled and nodded. Keisha knew that this was just the beginning. There would be more challenges ahead, more moments of doubt, more people who would try to tell her what she couldn't do. But she also knew she had the strength to face whatever came. She had proven it to herself on that stage tonight. The music had set her free. 3 months later, Keisha's right arm was fully healed and strong again. She threw herself back into playing with both hands, discovering that her left hand was now significantly more skilled than before. The months of intense single-hand practice had made her overall playing stronger and more nuanced. She continued studying with Miss Chen and started performing at larger venues around the city. Word had spread about the girl who performed with one hand, and people wanted to hear more. But now, when she played with both hands, audiences were even more impressed. They could hear the depth and skill that had been forged through challenge. Mr. Richardson's words, once meant to discourage, had instead ignited a fire that drove Keisha to heights she might never have reached otherwise. She thought about him sometimes and hoped he had found peace, but mostly, she thought about the music. Because in the end, that was what mattered, not the obstacles she faced or the people who doubted her, just the pure, beautiful, transformative power of music, and what it could do when someone refused to give up on their dreams. Years later, when Keisha performed in concert halls and spoke to young musicians, she would tell them about that spring recital, about the cast on her arm and the teacher who said she wasn't good enough, about the hours of practice and the moment she walked onto that stage. And she would tell them the most important lesson she learned that day, that the only limitations that truly matter are the ones we place on ourselves. Everything else is just noise, waiting to be drowned out by the sound of our own courage and determination. As Keisha approached the final measures of the piece, She felt completely connected to the music. Her left hand moved with a fluidity and power she had never experienced before. The final notes cascaded down like falling water, growing softer and more delicate until they faded into silence. For a moment, there was complete quiet in the auditorium. Keisha kept her hand on the keys, her eyes still closed, letting the last vibrations of sound disappear into the air. Then slowly she opened her eyes and looked out at the audience. The applause started with one person, then another, and suddenly the entire auditorium erupted. Students were on their feet, clapping and cheering. Some were wiping tears from their eyes. Even the students who had been competing against her seemed genuinely moved by what they had just witnessed. Keisha stood up from the piano bench, slightly dazed. This wasn't just polite applause. This was something else entirely. She looked toward the judges' table and saw Principal Hayes clapping enthusiastically, a huge smile on her face. Mr. Williams was shaking his head in amazement, as if he couldn't quite believe what he'd just heard. And Mr. Richardson. He was sitting very still, his hands folded on the table in front of him. He wasn't clapping, but his expression had completely changed. The smugness and condescension were gone, replaced by something that looked almost like shock. He stared at Keisha as if seeing her for the first time. Keisha gave a small bow and walked off the stage, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. As she made her way back to her seat, students reached out to touch her arm or whisper words of encouragement. Destiny was crying openly, giving her a thumbs up with both hands. The rest of the auditions continued, but Keisha barely registered them. She sat in her seat, replaying every moment of her performance in her mind. Had she really just done that? Had she actually pulled it off? The adrenaline was still coursing through her veins, making her hand shake slightly. When all the auditions were finished, Principal Hayes took the microphone. Thank you to all of our talented students who auditioned today. The judges will now deliberate and post the results on Monday morning. I want to say that every single one of you showed tremendous courage and skill today. You should all be very proud. As students filed out of the auditorium, Keisha felt a hand on her shoulder. She turned to find Mr. Williams, the band director, smiling at her. That was extraordinary, Keisha. Truly extraordinary. I've been teaching music for 20 years, and I've never seen anything quite like that. Thank you, Mr. Williams, Keisha said, feeling warmth spread through her chest at his words. Whatever happens on Monday, you should know that what you did today matters. You reminded all of us why we love music in the first place. He patted her shoulder once more and walked away. Destiny ran up and hugged Keisha so tightly she could barely breathe. You were incredible. I knew you would be, but that was beyond anything I imagined. Everyone was crying. Did you see? Even some of the boys were wiping their eyes. They walked out of the auditorium together, and Keisha felt lighter than she had in weeks. Regardless of whether she made it into the recital, she had done what she set out to do. She had proven to herself that she was capable of more than she knew. That evening at home, Nana Rose wanted to hear every detail. Keisha described the performance, the feeling of being on stage, the applause. Her grandmother listened with shining eyes, nodding along. I'm so proud of you, baby, Nana Rose said, pulling her into a hug. Not just because you played beautifully, but because you didn't let fear or doubt stop you. That's the real victory. The weekend passed slowly. Keisha tried to distract herself with homework and spending time with family, but her mind kept drifting back to Monday morning. Would she make it into the recital? Part of her felt confident. She knew her performance had been strong. But another part of her worried. What if the judges thought the one-handed performance was more of a novelty than serious music? What if Mr. Richardson's vote counted enough to keep her out? Monday morning arrived with gray skies and a light drizzle. Keisha got to school early, her stomach full of butterflies. A crowd had already gathered around the music hallway where the results would be posted. Destiny was waiting for her at the entrance. I couldn't look without you, Destiny said, grabbing Keisha's hand. Come on, let's find out together. They pushed through the crowd of students until they could see the announcement board. A single sheet of paper was posted with the heading Spring Recital Performers, followed by 12 names in alphabetical order. Keisha's eyes scanned the list, her heart racing. There were names she recognized, talented students who had performed beautifully at the auditions. She kept reading, getting closer to the W's, and then she saw it. Williams, Keisha. Her name was on the list. She had made it. She was going to perform in the spring recital. Destiny screamed and hugged her, jumping up and down. You did it! You actually did it! Other students congratulated her as word spread through the crowd. Some seemed genuinely happy for her, while others looked surprised that she had been selected. But Keisha didn't care about their reactions. She had proven what she needed to prove. In music class that day, Mr. Richardson was uncharacteristically quiet. He went through the lesson plans without his usual sarcastic commentary. When he dismissed the class at the end of the period, he called out, "Miss Williams, please stay behind for a moment." Keisha's stomach tightened. Destiny gave her a worried look, but Keisha nodded that she'd be okay. The other students filed out, and soon it was just her and Mr. Richardson in the classroom. He stood by his desk, not looking at her directly. For a long moment, he said nothing. Then finally he spoke. "Your performance at the audition was technically proficient." Keisha waited, sensing there was more coming. Mr. Richardson cleared his throat, clearly uncomfortable. "I may have underestimated your dedication and ability. Your selection for the recital was unanimous among the judges." He paused, and when he continued, his voice was softer. "I taught music for a long time before I retired. I've seen a lot of students come and go. Some had talent but no work ethic. Others had work ethic but no real gift. Rarely did I see both." He finally looked at her, and Keisha was surprised to see something vulnerable in his expression. "I became cynical over the years. I stopped believing that students truly cared about music the way I did. When I saw your cast, I assumed you'd use it as an excuse. I was wrong." Keisha didn't know what to say. This was not the conversation she had expected. "I'm not good at apologies," Mr. Richardson continued. "But what I said to you on that first day was inappropriate and unfair. You didn't deserve that. And what you did at that audition, playing that piece with one hand, that took real courage and artistry. I should have recognized that earlier." For a moment, Keisha felt the anger she had been carrying around for weeks. This man had hurt her, had tried to make her doubt herself. A simple apology didn't erase that. But as she looked at him now, she saw not a cruel teacher but a tired old man who had let disappointment turn him bitter. "Thank you for saying that," Keisha said quietly. "It hurt when you said those things. I almost gave up because of it. But I realized something through this whole process. Other people's opinions of me don't define who I am or what I'm capable of. I had to prove that to myself more than I had to prove it to you." Mr. Richardson nodded slowly. "That's a lesson some people never learn. You're wise beyond your years, Miss Williams." He picked up his briefcase and walked toward the door, then paused. "I look forward to seeing your performance at the recital. And this time I'll be in the audience, truly hoping you succeed." After he left, Keisha sat alone in the classroom for a few minutes, processing what had just happened. She didn't feel victorious or vindicated. She felt something more complex, a mixture of satisfaction and compassion. She had won, but not in the way she had originally imagined. She hadn't destroyed Mr. Richardson or made him look foolish. She had simply shown him and herself what was possible. Over the next few weeks, preparations for the spring recital intensified. Students had regular rehearsals, practicing on the stage in the auditorium to get comfortable with the space and the piano. Keisha continued working with Miss Chen, refining every aspect of her performance. "The technical part is solid," Miss Chen told her during one session. "Now we need to think about the performance itself. How you present yourself on stage, how you connect with the audience. Music is not just about the notes. It's about the communication between the performer and the listener." They worked on stage presence, on how Keisha would walk to the piano, how she would acknowledge the audience, even how she would breathe between sections of the piece. Every detail mattered. At school, the excitement about the recital was building. Posters were hung in the hallways and parents were buying tickets. The event was scheduled for a Friday evening 3 weeks away. It would be held in the auditorium, and based on ticket sales, it looked like the space would be completely full. Keisha's cast was scheduled to come off 2 days before the recital. The timing was cutting it close, but the doctor had assured her that her arm should be fully healed by then. Still, Keisha couldn't help but worry. What if there were complications? What if her arm was weak or stiff after being in the cast for so long? Miss Chen addressed these concerns during a lesson. "Even if your cast comes off before the recital, you shouldn't try to play with both hands. Your right arm will need time to regain strength and flexibility. Stick with the left-hand piece. That's what you've prepared for, and that's what you'll perform beautifully." As the recital date approached, Keisha found herself feeling calm rather than nervous. She had put in the work. She had practiced until her left hand could play the piece in her sleep. She knew she was ready. The night before the recital, Keisha couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about everything that had led to this moment. The initial injury, Mr. Richardson's cruel words, the decision to audition, all those hours of practice, the audition itself, and now this final performance. She thought about what this journey had taught her, that limitations could be overcome, that other people's doubts didn't have to become her reality, that true strength came not from never falling, but from getting back up every time you did. Tomorrow night she would walk onto that stage in front of hundreds of people. She would sit at that piano with one hand and create something beautiful, and whatever happened after that, she would know that she had given everything she had. 3 weeks before the audition, Keisha hit a wall. She sat at the piano in the community music center, staring at the sheet music that she had nearly memorized, and her left hand simply wouldn't cooperate. The notes that had been flowing smoothly just days ago now felt disconnected and mechanical. Worse, her hand was starting to hurt from the constant practice, a dull ache that ran from her palm to her wrist. Miss Chen noticed immediately. "Stop," she said gently, placing a hand on Keisha's shoulder. "Your hand needs rest, but the audition is coming up. I can't afford to rest. I need to keep practicing." Keisha's voice carried a note of desperation. "Keisha, if you injure your left hand by overworking it, you won't be able to play at all. Sometimes the best thing you can do for your music is to step away from it." Miss Chen guided her away from the piano and sat down beside her. "Tell me what you're feeling right now." Keisha felt her composure crack. "I'm scared. What if I'm not good enough? What if I've been working all this time and I still fail? What if Mr. Richardson is right? Right about what exactly? That I'm not a real musician? That I'm just someone who got lucky a few times?" The words tumbled out, exposing the fear that had been growing underneath all her determination. Miss Chen was quiet for a moment. Then she shared something Keisha had never heard before. "When I was in music school, I had a professor who told me I would never make it as a professional pianist. He said my hands were too small, my technique was flawed, and I didn't have the emotional depth to connect with audiences. I believed him for a while. I stopped practicing. I even considered quitting music altogether." Keisha looked up in surprise. "But you're an amazing pianist." "What changed? I realized something important. That professor's opinion was just one opinion. It wasn't truth, it was just his perspective, colored by his own biases and limitations. The real question wasn't whether he believed in me. It was whether I believed in myself." Miss Chen smiled. "You know what you're capable of, Keisha. You've been playing piano for 7 years. You've performed for crowds and moved people with your music. One man's negativity doesn't erase all of that." Keisha absorbed these words, feeling something shift inside her. "So what do I do now?" "You take 2 days off from practicing. Let your hand recover. Spend time doing things that fill your spirit instead of draining it. Then when you come back, you'll be stronger and more focused. Trust the process." Keisha followed Miss Chen's advice, though it felt strange not to practice. She spent time with her family, watched movies with Destiny, and even did some of the art projects she'd been neglecting. Nana Rose took her out for ice cream and told her stories about her own youth, about times when she'd faced challenges and doubted herself. "You know what I learned, baby?" Nana Rose said as they sat in the ice cream parlor. "Confidence isn't about never having doubts. It's about moving forward even when you do have them. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's being scared and doing it anyway." When Keisha returned to the piano 2 days later, something remarkable happened. Her hand felt refreshed, and suddenly the piece that had been eluding her came together. The notes flowed naturally, and she could feel the emotion behind each phrase. She wasn't just playing anymore. She was making music. At school, the atmosphere around the upcoming auditions intensified. Students who planned to audition could be seen practicing in every available space. The competition would be fierce. Only 12 students would be selected for the recital, and more than 30 had signed up to audition. Mr. Richardson seemed to take particular pleasure in reminding everyone how rigorous the judging would be. "This isn't a participation trophy situation," he announced one day in class. "If you're not ready, you'll be cut. Simple as that." His eyes swept across the room and landed on Keisha. She met his gaze steadily, no longer intimidated. She had something he would never have: pure love for the music, untainted by bitterness or ego. The auditions were scheduled for a Friday afternoon in the school's auditorium. Students would perform in the order they'd signed up, and each would have 5 minutes to showcase their piece. The judges would be Mr. Richardson, Principal Hayes, and Mr. Williams, the band director. The day before auditions, Keisha had a final practice session with Miss Chen. They ran through the entire piece 3 times. By the 3rd time, Keisha played it with such feeling that Miss Chen had tears in her eyes. "That was beautiful," Miss Chen whispered when the last notes faded. "That's the performance you need to give tomorrow. Don't think about Mr. Richardson or proving anyone wrong. Just play like that from your heart and let the music speak for itself." That night, Keisha could barely sleep. She ran through the piece in her mind over and over, her fingers twitching slightly as she imagined pressing down on the keys. She thought about what this moment meant, not just for her, but for everyone who had ever been told they weren't good enough, that their dreams were too big, that they should give up. The next morning, Destiny met her at her locker with a small gift bag. "Open it," she said with an excited smile. Inside was a bracelet made of purple and silver beads with a small charm in the shape of a piano. "For luck," Destiny explained. "Although you don't need it. You're going to be incredible." Keisha hugged her friend tightly. "Thank you. For everything. For believing in me when I didn't believe in myself." The school day crawled by. Every class felt twice as long as usual. Keisha could barely focus on anything except the audition. Finally, the last bell rang, and students who were auditioning made their way to the auditorium. The space was larger than Keisha remembered. Rows of seats stretched back into shadows, and the stage looked massive and intimidating. A beautiful grand piano sat in the center, illuminated by stage lights. 3 tables were set up in the front row for the judges. Keisha took a seat in the back of the auditorium with the other students waiting to audition. Her heart hammered in her chest. She watched as the first performer, a girl who played flute, took the stage. The girl was talented, her notes clear and precise. One by one, students performed. There were violinists, singers, a boy who played saxophone, and several pianists who played complex pieces with both hands. Each performance was good, some exceptional. Keisha felt her nerves building. These were her competitors, and they were all incredibly talented. What if her one-handed performance wasn't enough? What if the judges saw it as a limitation rather than a triumph? Finally, her name was called. "Keisha Williams, this was it." Keisha stood up, her legs feeling shaky. She walked down the aisle toward the stage, aware of every eye on her. The cast on her right arm seemed to glow under the lights, making her injury impossible to ignore. As she climbed the steps to the stage, she caught sight of Mr. Richardson at the judges' table. His expression was skeptical, almost condescending, as if he'd already decided how this would go. Principal Hayes offered an encouraging smile, and Mr. Williams nodded supportively. Keisha walked to the piano and sat down on the bench. She adjusted her position, placing her left hand on the keys while her casted right arm rested in her lap. The auditorium was completely silent. She could hear her own breathing, feel the weight of expectation pressing down on her. For a moment, doubt crept in. What was she doing? How could she possibly pull this off? Everyone was waiting for her to fail, especially Mr. Richardson. Maybe she should have waited until her arm healed. Maybe this was a mistake. Then she remembered Nana Rose's words. "The music is already inside you. All you need to do is let it out." Keisha closed her eyes and took a deep breath. She let everything else fall away. The judges, the other students, Mr. Richardson's skepticism, even her own fear. There was only her and the piano and the music waiting to be born. She placed her fingers on the keys and began to play. Biko, opening notes of Scriabin's Prelude, and Nocturne for the left hand filled the auditorium. Keisha's left hand moved across the keys with confidence and grace. The melody sang out, haunting and beautiful, while her fingers simultaneously played the harmony beneath it. It was like watching someone paint with one hand while the other was tied behind their back, except the painting was somehow complete and perfect. As she played, Keisha forgot about everything except the music. Her hand knew where to go, what to do. All those hours of practice had created pathways in her mind and muscle memory in her fingers. The piece unfolded like a story, starting with a gentle, almost melancholy prelude that gradually built in intensity and emotion. In the audience, students who had been checking their phones or whispering to each other stopped and looked up. There was something captivating about watching someone overcome such an obvious limitation and create something so beautiful. It wasn't about sympathy or feeling sorry for her. It was pure admiration for what she was accomplishing in that moment. At the judges' table, Principal Hayes leaned forward, completely engaged. Mr. Williams had put down his pen and was simply listening, a smile spreading across his face. And Mr. Richardson, his expression had changed from skepticism to something else entirely, surprise perhaps, or maybe it was the beginning of grudging respect. Keisha moved into the nocturne section, the most technically challenging part of the piece. Her fingers flew over the keys, playing rapid passages that would have been difficult with two hands, let alone one, but she didn't falter. She had practiced this section hundreds of times, and now it flowed from her as naturally as breathing. The emotion in the music swelled, and Keisha poured everything into it. All her frustration, her determination, her love for music, her refusal to be defined by limitations. The piano became an extension of herself, and for those few minutes nothing else existed. That evening, Keisha sat at the old upright piano in her living room, staring at the keys with a mixture of determination and uncertainty. Her grandmother, who everyone called Nana Rose, shuffled in from the kitchen carrying 2 cups of hot chocolate. She set one down beside Keisha and settled into her favorite armchair nearby. "You've been awfully quiet since you got home from school," Nana Rose observed, her wise eyes studying her granddaughter's face. "Something happened today?" Keisha took a sip of the hot chocolate, letting the warmth spread through her before answering. "We had a substitute teacher in music class, Mr. Richardson." She paused, her jaw tightening at the memory. "He said some things about me, about my playing." Nana Rose's expression didn't change, but her eyes sharpened. "What kind of things?" "He basically said I'm not really talented, that people were just being nice. And now with my arm broken, he said it's probably for the best because it saves everyone from pretending to be impressed." The words came out in a rush, and Keisha felt the anger and hurt resurface. For a long moment, Nana Rose was silent. Then she let out a slow breath and leaned forward. "Baby girl, let me tell you something about people like that man. They've got so much bitterness inside them that it spills out onto everyone around them. It's not about you. It's about whatever disappointment is eating away at his own heart." "But what if he's right?" Keisha whispered. "What if I'm not actually good?" Nana Rose stood up and walked over to the piano. She placed her weathered hand on Keisha's shoulder. "Child, I've been alive for 68 years. I've heard a lot of music in my time, and I'm telling you, when you play, something special happens. It's not just about hitting the right notes. It's about what you put into those notes. That comes from in here." She tapped Keisha's chest gently. "And no broken arm or mean-spirited teacher can take that away from you." Keisha felt tears prick her eyes, but she blinked them away. "I want to perform at the spring recital, even with my arm like this." Nana Rose smiled slowly. "Then you will. What do you need?" "I need to find a piece written for one hand. Something beautiful and challenging. Something that will make people understand that I'm not giving up."